All right, happy to be joined with Tyler Beuerlein, Chief Revenue Officer of Hypur Incorporated. Tyler, it's been a couple months. Actually, I think it's been since last summer since we connected, but great to have you back on. And how are things?
Been too long. Things have been great. You?
Yeah, busy. I know it's a lot changed. Startup company. It's now starting to prove itself, but I'm sure you probably understand that better than anyone, obviously. What's it been now? 5 or 6 years you've been with Hypur?
7.
Has it been 7 years? Wow.
7. Yeah, I jokingly refer to the cannabis industry as dog years. So
Yeah.
I'm approaching 50 in cannabis. Yeah.
What's that mean?
What's that?
I said, what does that mean then?
It's such a nascent industry. Things happen so quickly,
Yeah.
so it's been amazing to be on the front lines of it,
Yeah.
in a unique way, and very thankful to have that opportunity back in the day. And just like you, I mean, I see how fast your business is expanding, and it's great to see. And I've seen that for everybody in this industry as well.
It's great. Well, I've really grabbed my interest with some of the stuff that you've been commenting on some of your social channels. And I want to begin with the stat that I found very interesting. It's estimated that Massachusetts cannabis industry is using up to 10% of the state's electricity availability, putting some places at risk of power outages because of an overloaded power grid. So given the power intensive nature of the industry, what needs to change and how do you think it'll happen?
Well, I think, you got to, here's the challenge with cultivation in the cannabis industry in general. In Massachusetts, obviously you've got some weather restrictions,
right,
which is forcing a lot of these companies indoors, but really take the power usage out of it from let's say an environmental perspective. The cost associated with that is so onerous,
right,
that long-term, those guys are not going to be able to compete with the cultivators, and I'll use the name Glass House out of California comes to mind. Right. I mean, they've got massive outdoor greenhouse cultivation and are producing product at a very, very cheap clip for premium product. And so I think long-term cultivation is a bit of a race to the bottom. And as it becomes commoditized, those guys that are taking up that amount of electricity are not going to be able to compete.
So when you see this industry continue to mature, and there's been the idea of federal legalization, some say it could happen fast, others say it's still years away. In the event that does happen, what kind of opportunity does this present for the Emerald Triangle and all the business and stuff that's being accomplished on the West Coast versus, like you said, the East Coast?
I think it remains to be seen. And one of the biggest caveats here is interstate commerce. So even if it becomes federally legal, you still have state regimes that are going to want to control their programs.
Right.
They're going to want to control how things happen. And so I don't see federal legalization occurring anytime soon, candidly.
Okay.
I think it's been used as a political tool without maybe the true will to bring it all the way to fruition. So I think we're years out on that front. But even then, I think that it's going to take years to formalize the structure of interstate commerce. But long term, it's going to be interesting. If you talk to the California cultivators, they feel like it's going to be similar to wine, where California grown cannabis is going to warrant a premium.
Right.
They're going to be able to do it cheaper than anybody else. But I think, again, like any other commodity, as these cultivations scale, that drives the cost down, and it's going to become survival of the fittest at that point.
Yeah, of course. You mentioned something about taxes. I want to focus on tax revenue, more specifically within the state of Illinois, which is one, obviously, the fastest growing cannabis states in the country. Last month, the state collected more tax dollars from cannabis versus alcohol, which seems to be a regular theme, $35 million versus $25 million for alcohol. So saying all this, how much of our priority is this going to become federally in the US, knowing that, especially with neighboring states who still haven't legalized cannabis, especially when you have, one state producing this kind of money and another state next to it not even legalizing the actual plant itself?
Well, I think you've seen this kind of play out from the standpoint that states can be competitive, right? And they're paying attention to what the other one's doing. And the one that comes to mind most recently is New York and New Jersey.
Right.
I knew some people in New York that said, hey, we're going to be years out. And my comment was, the second New Jersey drops the veil and they're gaining that tax revenue and people are crossing that bridge to buy in New Jersey, New York's going to follow immediately after. And, I had a couple of people tell me I was crazy, and, they played out that way because, again, those states don't want to let that tax revenue go.
Of course not. Yeah.
And so from a federal legalization standpoint, I don't know that that has as much of an impact. And the reason being is because 280E is still intact.
Right.
So the federal government's getting a
Big
premium
dollars.
tax
Yeah.
through that mechanism. And that's something that people don't talk about that often.
Yeah, that's for sure. So what do you think happens then over the next 6 to 12 months? Like, I know there's been conversations about safe banking. Do you think it gets passed? And I know we've had some conversations before in the past. A lot of the investor base think like this is going to change everything, and it very well could. However, you have some different opinions, maybe not different, but some insightful information regarding safe banking, that there could be some misconceptions. So in the event something that were to pass, how do you see the industry all unfolding, let's say, in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, it was really interesting to me in revealing. MJ Biz did a survey to the industry and to sophisticated folks that understand the cannabis industry about what they were most excited about if safe passed. And probably 80% of them said, we can't wait to use credit cards. And I can tell you, behind the scenes in our world on the compliance side, the branded card networks have been very specific about federal legality being the catalyst to bring them in. They're not going to participate in a federally illegal industry, regardless of the SAFE Act or anything else. So I think the notion that all of a sudden that's going to free up is very misguided. I don't think I know it is. And then from a banking perspective, this problem has solved itself in the US. There is not an operator today that, provided they're operating in a legal market, that I probably couldn't help get banked in a very short amount of time. And furthermore, we're seeing the asset class and the size of institutions that are banking this in the US really increase. So one of the newest entrants is 55 billion in assets, and they're expanding throughout the entire country to bank the industry. So I don't know that it's going to have much impact. And even then, even if this becomes federally legal tomorrow, this is a highly regulated, cash-intensive business. If you look at those industries outside of cannabis that fall into that same category, they have many of the same banking challenges. So, I would caution folks on expectation if they're thinking that that's going to be a catalyst for something significant in the industry.
So walk me through your company, Hypur, Incorporated. It's a technology platform that obviously works within cannabis. I assume psychedelics is obviously picking up momentum for you as well. Are you doing anything with crypto right now as well?
No. Combining one highly regulated industry with another is a non-starter from a regulatory compliance perspective. So I try and explain to people in this equation, and I'm speaking about cannabis banking specifically, or really any other highly regulated industry, the only conversation that matters is the conversation between the regulatory body and the financial institution. And I've been fortunate to spend a lot of time with bank and credit union regulators, and they want no part of crypto being involved in a federally illegal industry. So I would say on that note, that's a non-starter for us. We're used by banks and credit unions to bank highly regulated industries, and then we have some payment products that enable permissible digital commerce in industries that don't have access to traditional forms of payment. So we've seen our business grow, and we're about to launch some new products that I can't really elaborate on too much that are really going to have a big impact on the industry. So certainly exciting time for us.
This appears to be a big opportunity for your company, does it not?
It is, and it has been. I can tell you that it's been a very challenging road. I mean, 7 years in this space, and it's such a nascent industry, things are always changing. And so fortunately for us, we built out a lot of our platform based on those needs and those things that have arisen over the years. So we're fortunate to be in a very good spot, and we're excited about where we're going.
It's great. You speak to a lot of companies, obviously, within this space. You've obviously been very vocal to talk about what the U.S. cannabis landscape currently is compared to Canada. Wanted to touch on Canada briefly. Where do you think the state of affairs is for the Canadian cannabis market, and how do you see that unfolding? Because I want to talk to a lot of people, and I don't want to say it's gloom, but it seems like the opportunity has passed, does it not?
I don't know that the opportunity was ever really there.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunately, I see those companies, I see what they're doing from an executive standpoint. I see the moves they're making, and I'm not trying to be critical of anybody, but I think they're melting ice cubes. And that's proven out through their financial reporting. I think when Canada legalized and those main big companies came out and promised the world, and I made the comment on some social media posts that I've heard a Canadian cannabis company CEO every year for at least the last 3 come out and say, hey, the US is going to legalize federally this year, like unequivocally. They made the statement. And for us on the front lines here, we sit back and say, hey, that's very wishful thinking. And the thought was the true market that matters is the US market right now.
Yeah, of course.
It just does from a revenue standpoint. I mean, California is the 5th largest economy in the world, right? So the notion that they were going to use the money that they could raise in the public markets to go and acquire those assets in the US and become the dominant players, that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
And even a couple years ago, when one of the big companies there made a deal to acquire one in the US pending legalization, that was by no means the first company they pursued.
Right.
None of the other MSOs wanted to deal with them or take any kind of structure anywhere near that. And I think they were smart to do that. But I actually think the whole notion, the whole dynamic is going to get flipped upside down. And I think that as they continue to bleed money in Canada with really no remedy, I don't care what anyone says, export is not a business model there. Those US MSOs are eventually going to go back and pick those assets off for pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
And I think it might happen faster than people realize.
It's interesting. Well, let's focus on consolidation and the domino effect that's already taking place within the states. The industry, the US market now, like we said, is in full consolidation mode, with private producers getting bought out and even large MSOs such as Harvest being acquired last month by Trulieve. How much consolidation do you think is left among the publicly traded companies within this space?
I think we're just at the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
You got to remember, when the first frenzy occurred, that was when, the Men's of the world went public.
Right.
And the liquidity markets opened up, and then they contracted, which I think was very healthy for the industry. People got back to fundamentals. Well, now over the last 18 months, that liquidity has absolutely exploded. And I can't say too much, but there are multiple major announcements coming on the consolidation front in the US. And again, you're just going to see the MSOs grow stronger. You're going to see them continue to target limited licensed medical markets. They will make major plays into California. I think a lot of those guys are sitting on the sidelines to try and wait to see who the real players are going to be and how that market is going to be formalized, post regulatory framework that occurred in January 2018. So this is inning 1 right now.
Well, when you look at regulatory framework, like Chuck Schumer, for example, he plans to introduce a bill to federally legalize cannabis, even though it has little chance of going through. What should people read into that? Should they read much into it at all?
My concern, and I've seen this over and over again, is I see politicians on both sides of the fence use topics like cannabis to essentially raise money and garner attention. And I wonder how serious they really are about getting these things across the finish line. And so I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I would hope, it's certainly cat's out of the bag. I would hope it happens sooner than later. But I don't see it happening really for years. Yeah. And I hate to say that, but
how do you see the industry, I guess, falling into place in the event that safe banking isn't passed, federal legalization does not happen? We're going to see, as you said, just the tip of the iceberg with consolidation. But if you were in this situation right now, 3 years from now, what does this landscape look like?
I think you're going to have some very sophisticated, seasoned operators that control the majority of the U.S. market. I think that you're going to continue to see other ancillary companies be consolidated. It's already happening on the distribution side. Herbal just acquired Blackbird. I don't know if you saw that announcement. And I think there are going to be more. You have Nick Kovacevic and the group out of Florida, the online distribution companies merging. And so I think that it's just going to continue to consolidate. And again, as those companies become stronger and as those revenues continue to increase, especially in limited license markets, these guys are just going to get more powerful. And the other thing I think you're going to see is, and it's interesting. It's been interesting to watch this. As restricted medical markets launch in the U.S., they'll launch. They'll have a limited license model, and they'll only approve certain conditions. Well, when those tax revenues start rolling in, states want more, right? And so all of a sudden, you see the programs expand. Eventually, they go rec. It just happened in Arizona, and so you're going to see the revenues continue to thrive for these companies throughout the U.S.
Yeah, it's big. A lot of states growing, that's for sure. I look at some of the states, even like Michigan, and how fast it's growing rapidly. It is incredible to see the growth, and like you said, barely scratching the surface for sure within this industry.
Really is, yeah.
Listen, I know you're busy. I appreciate you taking the time to connect with us. All great, obviously, connecting with you. I appreciate the insight. Let's keep in touch.
Chad, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Tyler.